Hello,
Ooh,
Craig.
hello, Craig. What's up, Craig? Thanks for being with us. Welcome to Roundup on the 13th of December 2023. If everything goes well, this recording will end up on the Broom Radio podcast, and I think it will be the first container of Roundup which is recorded and uploaded to the podcast. So, by way of introduction, I'll say that Roundup is a container that we hold every Mercury Day or Wednesday at around 5 p.m. Sofia time, and then I believe that's 10 a.m. New York time, 9 a.m. Louisiana time, and then something horrendously early Pacific time. And it's a container that we hold in order to talk about things which have been happening in this Discord server that we call the Broom, where most of our conversations, apart from the ones that happen in live containers, take place asynchronously and in text. And I feel like it's sort of like a town hall container where people can come through. The sun just went down here. People can come through and raise issues that they've been experiencing in the Broom, or give us shade to some issues or some topics of discussion that have been happening inside the Broom. And we can also just sort of like open quote round up, close quote, some of the conversations that have been happening in a synchronous fashion, and hold space for the magic that happens when we share space and time. So today is about, I want to say, like a day or so after the new moon went exact, and funnily enough, I started this recording at 5 and 50 seconds. But yeah, I'd love to hear from y'all how the new moon is treating you, or how you feel the new moon is treating the collective. And I know Hoda talked a little bit about the new moon in the field tuning container, but I feel like possibly it's okay to tread that ground anew. Hoda says yes, and there's a honey emoji. Mm.
Hi, everyone.
So, Hoda.
Hey. This new moon has me so tired, you guys.
Me too.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I think I said I meditated for like 8 hours today, more or less.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then I smashed a pizza.
That pizza looked good too.
It was very good.
I saw that it had pineapples on it.
Raise your hand if you're pineapple pizza gang.
I feel like there's a time and a place for pineapple.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of thinking about pineapple on pizza in the context of like dogma. You know, like I feel like there are people who consider themselves to be serious pizza aficionados.
That's what I was just thinking of.
Pineapple on pizza is sacrilege.
Right, like you're either one or the other.
Right. And I was kind of thinking about like how many people probably like do death work when it comes to spiritual practice, but won't, you know, countenance the presence of pineapple on pizza. Sure, I'm sure there's an overlap between people who consider themselves to be earnest spiritual practitioners who still feel called to announce to the world that pineapple should not be on pizza.
Yeah.
And it kind of struck me as one of the more delicious of ironies. Like, why? Why you gotta be so concerned about how other people dress their pizza?
Right. no pineapple on pizza ever for anyone.
Exactly. Not talking about the Levant. Anybody
Right.
ever. Do you feel like you're like transmuting collective karma? Is that why you might be feeling a little tired?
Yes, that is exactly why I feel.
What kind of karma, like, broadly speaking? Because I feel like there's a shit ton of stuff happening.
Yeah. Thank you for saying broadly, because I'm like, I was.
Pineapple and pizza karma.
Yes. For starters, and the fact that half those people probably don't even know how delicious that like a roasted pineapple is, but that is.
Ooh, I've never had roasted pineapple.
Well, like when you put it on pizza, especially if there's like cheese on there, there's probably going to be some like caramelization going on and like a little bit of, I want to say, like crustiness, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
Can I admit something?
Sure.
No.
I've never had pineapple on pizza.
Wow.
The irony of all shit talking.
Talking about that shadow work.
That's my confession of the day.
You gotta try it while well regulated and well resourced.
Yes.
Lest I invoke all the egregores.
Yeah, make sure you might want to light a white candle and perhaps Palo Santo to keep away those anti-pineapple on pizza demons.
Anyways, what you were saying?
Yes, sorry.
Oh, I totally forgot. Oh yeah, we were talking about collective karma. I mean, this is definitely part of it. But I feel like one of the things that I've been transmuting is just how sloppy organizations and institutions are, and how sloppy they are. They get so much funding and so many people to get to work for them, and it's been exhausting because it drains me. It just drains me.
That's so interesting that you said that, Hoda, because I was talking about that with my dad last night.
How is this coming up for y'all?
I'd say directly through, like, I've been substituting part-time at some local charter schools and it's pretty direct. Like just how I'm experiencing the level of disorganization, and like just know like, little things like how, for example, yesterday I was tasked to work in one of the classrooms, but then was pulled to another classroom. Then I was texted an assignment to go to another classroom, but then the number of the classroom that was given to me by the team lead didn't even exist.
Oh my god. What is this, Harry Potter?
Yeah, and like platform
9 3/4.
Yeah. I was just like, this is so strange. Like, it was so odd. And it was like, I mean, I have no shade to the team lead, because after a while spending time at school yesterday, I was there for like 8 hours. So like, after a couple hours, I realized that it's like the system of the school, like the system of the charter system in New Orleans, that's so broken. And I'm sure other in the nation. So I just was like face palming the entire day yesterday, and like really trying hard to be patient. But yeah, I felt like I was like in it.
Yeah, that's exactly the kind of thing that I feel like burns people out.
It definitely can. It definitely has.
Yeah, I feel like also something that's kind of coming through for me is just like, and I feel like this might be collective as well, is just like how, you know, like when people have like communication methods. Sorry, my cats are chewing each other. when people have like advanced communication methods, they sort of like, instead of augmenting our abilities to communicate and allowing us to communicate more effectively, somehow they end up helping us to communicate less effectively.
Like cell phones and messenger apps and ways to get in touch with each other, but it's not necessarily changing the way that like information that's to be communicated ends up becoming reacted through like different network communication people have.
I feel like you're breaking up a little bit for me.
Yeah, your audio is a little choppy.
Yeah, hang on one second. I'll just.
No worries.
No, but do you feel like this relates to what you said in the Levant channel the other day?
Which one of the things? What did I say in the Levant channel?
I'll read it to you because there's probably many things that you've said. But
okay, please feel free to read my words.
Yeah, you said, I feel like tension tends to cause collapse of channels that are core to meaning making and a constriction and harmonious co-vibration.
Yeah, I think that aligns. I mean, I feel like, most of these communication methods are kind of urgency coded, right? So like people tend to get on their phones in order to like use these communication methods, and then their phones are kind of, it's like opening Pandora's box of like all the shit that they haven't gotten to, right? Like messages that they receive from friends and family that they want to respond to, or like, ancestral trauma in the family WhatsApp. What's up, Tiff? What's up, Keeper of All?
Yeah.
What's up, Neville Longbottom? And then I feel like, there's like walkie-talkies, and I feel like walkie-talkies are kind of like, emergency responder coded or like military coded. So I can imagine that like tension causes people's like, like neural microtubules to collapse, and then causes them to communicate in sort of like knee-jerk or reactionary ways, and then therefore leads to like disruptions in communication, for sure. Does this connect to anything y'all feel like is showing up in the collective during this new moon?
Yeah.
I mean, I know that, well, I've been told or I've read that people are saying that Mercury is like stationing direct right now.
Yeah, Julie just said that in the chat.
Yeah? So, yes. So Mercury's going retrograde. It's about to go retrograde. Okay, great. So I feel like that's probably why the new moon is like kind of
spicy.
I want to say like emphasizing that switch, and probably like maybe why some of these things are happening. Yeah. How else are y'all feeling the new moon of the last couple of days? For me, the new moon tends to last like 3-4-ish days, I would say. Does anybody want to talk about things that have been coming up before we dive into what passes as an agenda? Okay. Well, I think I want to say one more thing about the new moon. Yeah, I guess I feel like I've said this in a number of places, and like a lot of y'all have sort of like done time with the lineage known as the Wearers of Lapis Lazuli, or the Walkers of Blue Stone, or the lineage that we're reforming in a lineage space that is currently called Born Days, but we're working on renaming. But like most of the lore, I would say, of this lineage that we have been exposed to is via a Twitter account which is called at K Neferhetep. And one of the things that he used to talk about, which still feels pretty true to me, as true as anything in our Logot is that, the new moon is a time for purification. And, like my metaphysical explanation of this is that when the sun is not giving light to the moon, then the unresolved ancestral karma, which exists in the lunar plane, is less available to us. So it could be said that ancestral demons or thought form complexes, which are attached to unresolved ancestral energies, are less active, which gives us the opportunity, I feel like, to examine our spiritual energy without the disorganization that comes from ancestral demons. So, I feel like that's going to show up for everybody differently, but of course I would say that it ends up, like dancing to the music of the spheres in a sense. So, I think like material around like communicating with our earth ancestors who are like, usually closest at hand are our family members, but also people who share genetic and epigenetic material with us, tends to be more alive. And then I would say, I think the new moon takes place in tropical Sagittarius. So, I guess like that's kind of coming through as like karma around imparting wisdom and seeking truth, which is more available or like easier to discern as being karmic and not
AKA pineapple on pizza.
And pineapple on pizza, very much. As far as I'm concerned. Well, I would say highly contested personal truths. It's a source of highly contested personal truth. And then, I would say that, people who are tuned into particularly the common astral plane, but also the common etheric and the common vibrational planes are probably doing a lot of work to help other people transmute their ancestral karma, or you could say the karma that exists in their bodies, which is more discernible in the absence of ancestral demons. Julie says, I'm being reminded of the post that I think in Nobu put somewhere in here regarding water molecules and water turning to ice. Rings a bell. Yeah, that makes sense. It's like, definitely easier to transport ice than water. It's easier to punch and strike ice than water. Yes, Julie says the way the molecules slow down and stabilize. Oh, that's a beautiful metaphor. Easier to slash. Anna says the pond is freezing.
I was telling you earlier that the pond is beginning to freeze.
Nice. That seems auspicious to me. So yeah, happy karmic releases, y'all. Happy new moon in tropical Sagittarius. I'm going to, while y'all like parlay, I'm gonna look at the sky and see where the new moon is, or where it has been, with regard to like fixed stars.
Does anyone know? Offer it. I don't.
Well, ooh, wow, it's well, right now it's conjunct the Lagoon Nebula. And
the Lagoon Nebula?
Yeah, and I would say when it was, exactly near the sun right now is conjunct Theta Ophiuchi, or Ophiuchus, and Gamma, I believe. I don't read Greek very well, but yeah, so kind of a controversial constellation. You know, some people say that it's kind of like the 13th sign of the zodiac, which is very disruptive to extant astrology practice, but it's sort of known as a serpent. And so,
Thank you for making that connection about the 13th sign of the zodiac. I've heard people argue about that.
yeah. I mean, I feel like it could be a bridge towards, like, you know, thinking about astrology more with regard to, like, what's in the sky versus, like, the zodiac. But I feel like it kind of, like, ends up causing awareness to consolidate around what the zodiac is and isn't.
Yeah.
Versus just being like, hey, like, you know, what does it mean from, like, say, an acoustic perspective if two things are in line versus, like, being apart, right? Or, like, if you're facing somebody at a table versus sitting behind them, what does that do to your relationship and how you vibrate with one another? Is kind of like the cleanest way for me to think about, like, star beings and planetary beings and stuff like that. And somebody also says, Julie says, it's smack in the middle of Sun and Mercury. The moon, that is, I guess. Which is also pretty interesting for me, given what's been showing up in my awareness. I can't really put my finger on it yet. But yeah, I would say I've been working a lot with, you know, like somebody, I think it was Damon, said that in late Atlantis, Egyptian Kemetic law, there was a lot of confusion between Moon and Mercury deities, which makes sense because they both move very quickly, pretty closely to the sun. And, well, they often interact with the sun, let's say. And, yeah, I'd say, like, you know, deities like Tahuti or Thoth often show up as sort of mercurial and lunar. And I felt like a lot of the stuff that's been coming through for me in the last sort of like 36 to 48 hours relates to discerning between mercurial and lunar energies. And then, yeah, I guess the last thing I want to say about it, which is not to say that y'all should not say anything more about it, is that, yeah, I think it was Julie who pasted a link to Twitter where somebody was talking about the different nature of like mercurial and lunar memory, where you could say like mercurial memory shows up in the form of like symbols, and lunar memory shows up in the form of like embodied memories or episodes. And yeah, I'm sure some of y'all have like pretty interesting aspects between the moon and Mercury, and I'm very curious if you feel like y'all have felt anything with regard to the interaction between thought and memory, or episodal memory and symbolic memory. I'll say finally that I'm reminded of Odin's ravens as thought and memory separately, and how yeah, I'd say like the thought raven perhaps represents Mercury, and the memory raven perhaps represents the moon. And now I'll shut up. Shut up. Apparently my drivel's been useful for some people based on the chat. Oh yeah, well, it says it was her that shared the tweet. I'm sorry. Or the thread, or whatever. But it says my moon and Mercury placements are the same as my nodes. Fancy that. Yeah, I know people who have moon and Mercury conjunct, which feels like a lot to me. And yeah, it's funny, my moon and my Mercury are just out of conjunction. But they're both pretty much like conjunct fixed stars in Virgo, like Spica and Parima. Which I think makes sense for me because I talk so much. I think I told you, I don't know if I told you all actually, but I found out that my father's mother's maiden name, her patronym, is Cha, which means like shooting words. I was just like, it's like, I'm sorry.
Why does that feel so aligned?
So I've been resolving karma around that.
That's amazing.
So y'all ready to get into the pins? What do we want to talk about first? I mean, like quickly I can say that, well, I guess I'll talk a little bit about the architecture of lineage spaces or ways in the broom. Woof, big topic, very complex topic. Woof. Well, now I want to talk about safety as well. What am I going to talk about first? Help me, help.
What is a way anyway?
Oh, okay. Well, I think like it's funny that if you look at the etymology of like Tao as in Taoism, it basically traces back to like a way, right? Versus like, say, like a single doctrine or set of dogma. I'm not sure what the plural is. You know, funnily enough, my mother's patronym is Ho, and it's also considered synonymous with Tao, but literally means river, which makes sense because for a long time people traversed the East Asian, you could say like subcontinent, using like these great rivers that traverse that part of the continent. But we have a Sharia way in the broom now, as of a few weeks ago, and Sharia etymologically also traces back to the word way or path or road, even though in common time it tends to be known as a law or a set of laws which bring, you could say, like civil affairs into alignment with interpretations of the word of God as channeled by Muhammad via the Archangel Jibril, right? Maybe that's like slightly contested. But, I think the last kind of institutional religious reference I want to bring in for now, and y'all can feel free to bring in others, but I'll say that like the people who were labeled as the Ascends by ancient Greeks, a lot of people say that they probably refer to themselves as Qumrani people because they're from Qumran. I think I'm pronouncing that roughly correctly. But they count amongst their ranks people like Mary of the Magdala, and I think Jesus is sort of considered sort of like a converted Esen or Qumrani, I believe. And the way that they tend to refer to themselves in the scripture is as the keepers of the way or the walkers of the way. So I feel like those are all some like very interesting references. I feel like it's very interesting that they are all foundational to exoteric religions, which most people in some way follow or are subject to the doctrine and dogma of, but they all started out not as, let's say, like fixed and concrete rulings or rules, but as journeys, or as I want to say containers for each and every person to explore and unfurl their own dharma. And does anybody have any questions or additions to make to what I'm driveling about right now? The ways I'm making with my words. Look at the chat again. I'm all over Discord right now. All over it. Oh, Anna says my audio sounds like I'm itching. I think, yeah, my latency was bouncing up and down for a little while. What it says aligned to something that I said along the way. But, you know, bringing it back to like safety and the broom, I guess I would say that, you know, the broom was originally called the breathing room, and it started from a group chat on Twitter, which was started by somebody named Tal Mott, who, yeah, basically wanted to create a container for people who were talking about spiritual affairs or, you know, spiritual adjacent affairs on Twitter at the time. I want to say this is about 2.5 years ago. He wanted to create a container for those people to discuss off of the public timelines the things that were showing up for them spiritually, and then that got pretty big and it got pretty rowdy, so we turned it into a Discord server, and then a lot of stuff happened, and then it became the broom. But I feel like I don't want to say syncretism because you all know how much I dislike isms and ideologies, but I would say like the process of syncreting, which etymologically refers to the coming together of peoples on an island called Crete, just like concrete does. But syncreting across different lineages has always been core to, I would say, like the spiritual agenda of the breathing room slash the broom. And in that sense, I feel like the architecture of what we call lineage spaces or ways is to make it very difficult for any specific lineage to become hegemonic in this container, and to make it very simple for many lineage spaces to make offerings to many beings inside and outside of time. And also make it simple for us to hold space for yeah, I wouldn't say like reforming wisdom codes for extant Earth lineages, as well as like wisdom codes pertaining to new lineages in the broom and on Earth. And does anyone have anything to add on that? I guess I'm just going. I'm just shooting.
No, it all feels aligned for me. Yeah, keep shooting them.
So, if you join the broom, which is a Discord server with a URL which stands for Universal Resource Locator that starts with https://discord.gg/blah blah blah blah, then you will end up in a channel called the broom. And you know, if you're lucky, some of the guardians and tenders, or even other people in the broom, or people who are still not in the broom, may say hello. And then you will likely be referred to a channel called #ways-cyclone emoji, which is where we describe the various lineage spaces that we have in the broom. And then, you know, through either conversation or answering an automatic questionnaire that we send to people who've joined the broom, you can provide information about why you joined the broom, where you are in your spiritual practice, what you feel like you can contribute to and learn from space such as the broom. And then it's likely that gardeners and tenders will invite you to apply for roles that will grant you access to different categories in the broom, where we discuss and hold space for these lineages to bloom. And also, any time you wish, you can go into any of the channels in the category called ways and just ask about any of the lineage spaces which are represented by channels in that category. And I'll say that, yeah, like, you know, even though it's considered to be like pretty foolhardy for me to be situating my lineage in a Discord server which is democratically controlled, which I think, you know, I won't speak to too much now, but I'll say that the broom is like a democracy or a cooperative with democratic processes. You know, like a lot of practitioners would be like, I want to own the space. I want to own the property in which my lineage space appears. Because, you know, right now, anybody who has the role at the broom could probably start a vote to be like, I would like to disseminate the zero lineage, and I would have to disband my lineage space, and everything that's in there would be lost to time. But I feel like it's a stake for me. I feel like it's something that guarantees that I show up as the most integrated self that I can show up as. Feel like it guarantees that I am honest and held accountable, and I feel like it guarantees that the role that I play in the governing of the broom is for the benefit of all beings in the broom. And then I'll also say that those who have self-nominated or been nominated to become tenders and gardeners and then taken on that role are also trusted to use their integrity and their discernment to decide who has the privilege of participating in the democratic process. And, you know, 000 is the lineage space that I hold, which relates, you know, TLDR relates to exorcism. But we also have the Iaga way, the Sharia way. We have lineage spaces dedicated to gardening in the broom and outside the broom, and tending in the broom and outside the broom. We have a lineage space called World, where we can talk about what's happening in the waking dream on Earth. As said before, we have a lineage space called Born Days, which relates to reforming what I'll call like a astrological lineage called the Walks of Bluestone, or Wearers of Lapis Lazuli. And we also have, I'm just going down the list, we also have a lineage space called Culture, which is, you could almost sort of liken to like the Lincoln Center in New York, or Fondazione Prada in Milano, you know, just like a collection of galleries and libraries where we hold space for lineages that don't come from people keeping them inside the broom. And then as of today, we have a lineage space called Safety. But, you know, before I talk about safety, I guess I want to know if anybody wants to talk about lineages that they keep in the broom. We also have an archive lineage space, which is basically for anyone who cares enough to look through channels which are no longer part of the living broom. Which I know is useful for some people, but yeah, I'm trying to see if there's anything for me to go to the archive. I know there's some fucking juicy shit in there. Anna says, if you want to check our work, yes. So, you know, we're praying to the Discord gods, but I think one of the very cool things about the broom is that we don't necessarily have to speculate entirely when it comes to determining, like, okay, what really happened, what was written about it, what was, burnt, which books were burnt, etc., when it comes to piecing together history, because the history of the broom is in the broom itself. The older seeds. No one wants to talk about any of the lineages that they cooperatively keep, or steward, or garden.
I'd like to talk about it a little bit.
Please.
I don't think I'll be saying anything that you haven't already mentioned, but I guess, yeah, just to kind of highlight the ways that I feel invested in and have a stake in. The Iyaga lineage space is a way that is an offering from my lineages on astral containment and astral hubbing. And that sounds like really abstract, but to put it, I guess, simply, yeah, Iyaga feels like a way that precipitates other ways in relation to how people and their ancestors relate to the earth and relate to the cosmos. I'm like really, I don't know why I'm hearing it's kind of like a place to go. In my mind, the way that I see it in the astrals is like a place that people can come to renew their lineages and also like release whatever is like harming their lineages across time and across space. Another way that I feel really invested in is the Sharia way. And I've been facilitating containers such as book club and remembering Sharia, which was like a pre-game to this way's genesis, like before it became a thing. And that feels like, yeah, a direct kind of response to how I was raised in a Sunni Muslim household, and then also had to watch my parents adjust some of their practices. And yeah, adjust some of their devotional practices to fit them and their lifestyles. So I feel like there's a lot to share there. And yeah, I'll also highlight the Born Days way because I feel like it's really, I don't know, it just helps me look at the lore from the walkers of Bluestone or the wearers of lapis lazuli from an entirely new perspective, because I was also really taken by like the first time I ever saw that lore being dropped on social media. So to see us reforming it and like recapitulating its relevance to this time frame is really important to me.
Oh shit. Recapitulating.
Recapitulating.
I got the image of like a catapult and then like Kensu being thrown into a catapult and then shot into a pool on spring break and landing happily and safely in tropical waters. I mean, I feel like there's so much to say about the Born Days way. Yeah, it probably does. Get a little shady in the broom.
A lot of shady, I feel.
I said recently on Twitter, like tongue-in-cheek, wise man say, man who embraces no shade as ethics soon ends up perishing in desert. I just think it's like, I think this is like safety adjacent, right? It's like,
yeah,
if we can only say things in ways which everybody considers to be polite, particularly in ways that the overculture considers to be polite, then there are going to be a lot of things that aren't said. And I would say also that the things that the overculture tends to consider polite are not the things which either lovingly or unlovingly disagree with aspects of the overculture. And yeah, let's face it, like the overculture is desertifying our planet. You know, I think, I forget the exact stats, but I believe since the 1970s we've lost 8% of the biodiversity on Earth. And yeah, I know like there's some like breatharians out there, but you know the air is also getting pretty shitty. But yeah, I would say that like we will perish if we cannot speak on the overculture. Woo! Tiff says, I also feel, well, I feel like the cultures with the best manners also throw the best shade. That's fucking lit.
Tiff, can you say more on that?
That is some of the best shade. And I also agree. Yeah, do you want to
Hello,
say more?
this is Tiff.
Hello.
Yes, I would like to say more.
Yeah.
What? All right, so I just noticed like throughout my life, like I started out when I was young doing taekwondo, and like that was Korean culture 101 real quick, and it was like, okay, they're like super polite, super cool, but then like behind the scenes, very, very kind of abrasively mean, like a Loki. But it was like, okay, interesting. And then like I was watching what's that show? Downton Abbey, right? So you know that's the bougie culture. And like, but the grandma, dowager, Professor McGonagall old lady, she be dragging people to their face, but like so prim and proper, and like never a evil word, very kind words, but you just feel my feelings be hurt for them people watching her say. And like just throughout like various like very very well manicured culture, it's always something beneath the surface, and it's a good hard surface to store things beneath. So it's like if you're gonna be polite, you can still be honest, and that's the art of it all. If you can say what you feel without like being too abrasive, like you mastered the art of it, I think.
That's fucking law.
Yeah.
Yeah, also, like, I like to come in from the blind side, as anyone who's played soccer with me knows. And I'll say that, like, often I feel like the people who are, like, most offended by some of the best shade are, like, the ones with the poorest manners. Or the most poorest manners. What it says, shade, lineage, space, coming to you soon. I feel like that's every lineage, space, and to be but yeah, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like some people get like ruffled sometimes by some shades, and yeah, I feel like it's because perhaps they lack that like hard, I don't know what you call it, to like boundary, or I don't know, manners. And I think, like all of us sometimes get a little bit disrupted by shade, but it's just a general tendency I've noticed. Does anybody else want to say anything about shade? Anna says it's good for the immune system. Yeah. Tata says it keeps me spry. TBH. Yeah, I appreciate
I
that.
feel like, and I also feel like too, like when I can trust somebody to throw shade in my direction, and like I can receive it, I feel like it's like feedback in the moment at its most like basic premise. Because it's also, I noticed that a lot of shade is not about preserving the overculture. It's about how stupid you look preserving culture.
It's like it keeps the soil fresh.
Yeah.
Like if you don't have shade, then the soil gets all dry, and then like the overculture ends up dry and decrepit.
Exactly.
And there's like no cultures for the overculture to appropriate and steal from anymore.
Ooh, clock that tea. Clock that tea.
I love what you said about giving feedback in the moment, though, versus like, having to submit like a form or like an official complaint to a governing body, um, which is safety adjacent.
I do. Yeah, I was like, how does this bridge to safety? But
yeah, I mean,
I feel like it does.
I mean, go on. Please go on.
Oh, I don't know. I just feel like it feels like we've been like leading up, or like we've been like kind of like clearing up a little clearing to talk about safety. That's how it feels to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, having said that, yeah, I would agree that the cultures with the best manners often know how to, like, get shady in, like, the most refined ways, but I think if we're looking at the overculture now, and, I think it would be honest for us all to say that we are somewhat beholden to the overculture because it gives us, like, Spotify and shit. Like, we all kind of share and are sometimes, and some people more often than not, like possessed by the overculture, such that it makes it very difficult for us to deliver like good shade. And I would say also like aspects of the overculture make it very hard for us to deliver shade and distribute it widely. And also like, I think like the best cultures are very specific, and so is like the best shade, right? So it's like the best shade that I can deliver for a certain context isn't really going to read in a different context with people of different cultures. And so, to make it like a little more concrete, I'll say that we live in a time of parasocial media. And I would say the dynamic of parasocial media, one, is people end up giving their work for free in order to become known and then have a hard time sustaining their work. Secondly, I'd say that like that dynamic is one of the dynamics that causes people to use parasocial media as I want to say like a channel for accumulating authority. And I would say that yes, parasocial media existed before the internet, but the internet widely distributed influence so that people can amass more and more authority. And I feel like what parasocial media doesn't do a good job of, which I think social media does, is making sure that, let's say, like, if somebody's personal parasocial media empire is like a mountain, you could say that it's very easy for water or communications to get from the top of the mountain down to the bottom of the mountain. But it's very difficult for those at the bottom of the mountain to get communication back up to the top. It's very difficult for those at the bottom of the mountain to talk amongst one another in order to facilitate getting information back to the top. And so we end up with these entrenched communicational obstructions, which, hopefully, based on what I'm transmitting in the material and in the immaterial, you could see how this ends up ruining or causing miscommunication and discommunication amongst social bodies. So, to make it even more concrete, people say that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. I think other people more accurately say that power reveals corruption and absolute power absolutely reveals corruption. But I think, yeah, we have lived in societies for a long time, but we live in a society now which is particularly oriented towards accumulating authority such that miscommunication ensues within a social body, and then people end up being untouchable. It becomes very difficult for people to be corrected, even if they're, highly valorized or very popular. It becomes easy for them to get away with a lot of shit without anybody else hearing about it. And I feel like the safety way is about repairing those communicational links. Tiff says, maybe safety is the safe, shady space for us to be more explicit, because creating the shade ourselves in public is a task. Ashe, 100%. Tiff says, you gotta carry it to the top in buckets and try not to drink it all. Oof. Love that metaphor. If it's a metaphor. Yeah, I would say, to make it even more concrete, the safety way is a place that people who opt into becoming what we've called safety inspectors for now, just because it's funny, people there have access to a category in the broom, and the first thing that we're going to be working on is producing a Google form so that people can talk about some of the experiences they have with other people in social media, whether they're explicitly spiritual or not, and they can submit their articulations of their experience anonymously if they don't feel like it's safe. They could submit whatever they want, because often our experiences are so specific. If we talk about them specifically, then even if we don't include our names, then people, if the information becomes public, then people will know that somebody said something about somebody, and that might make them feel unsafe or actually be unsafe. I believe it will also include fields where people can talk about how we can get in contact with them, so that if we want to facilitate repair within the being of the person who's making the report, then that's more possible. We've talked about holding space for people who feel they have copped abuse from the same practitioners or the same groups of practitioners or the same lineages to get together in order to share their experiences and debrief and perhaps do some healing together. And then, I think like the outcomes from there are sensitive to context, right? So I feel like it's only fair to say that many of us unconsciously abuse other people. I think that's just the nature of our realm. And sometimes we just need to know. And sometimes it's difficult for people to give us that feedback because of perceived or actual, or, I think perceived and actual kind of blur, but because of perceived or actual power discrepancies, influence discrepancies, because of karma that makes it difficult for us to speak our truth directly or indirectly. Yeah, I think some of us just need to know in graceful and compassionate ways. And, I'd say like for many earnest and highly integrated practitioners, that's enough for those practitioners to go and do their work. And then eventually, I would say, make repair in the same containers in which rupture occurred, which is to say, if they said something in public, then they should atone publicly. If they said something in a less public container, then everybody who saw that should also know that repair or atonement is being made. But that's an aspiration. It may not happen in all cases. And I would say, like, in the most extreme cases, maybe the best we'll be able to do is to publish some of the first-hand and materially and interpersonally verifiable experiences that people share with us, so that other people can avoid getting into enmeshments and avoid being harmed by some of these people/practitioners. And yeah, I'd say it's a long way towards like some of these aspirations. But I'm really happy to be doing this work with y'all. I feel like it's important work. I don't think we're going to be doing it perfectly ever or from the get-go, but I'm really grateful to be working with such earnest practitioners that I can trust that we will all be doing our best to hold space for healing and refinement. And if you'd like to join us, then please hop into the Broom Discord, jump into the Safety Way, or just say anywhere that you're interested in helping with the Safety Way. and then we'll use our discernment to figure out whether or not it's the right time for you to jump aboard. Hoda says, I feel like the whole project is going to be eye-opening, to say the absolute least, in this moment. Tilda, I agree. Yeah, I'd say like the project has been eye-opening. I think like one of the earliest things which came out of what is now a way or lineage space in the Broom called Safety was a collection of material relating to a practitioner named Hanjo Utaku and his wife Amanda, or Witchels one. And I think that made like decent waves kind of like above and below the surface of parasocial media. I want to say that it probably saved some people from getting enmeshed with those people and copying some abuse. There's been a lot of discussion about Kensu Neferhetep in the Safety channel, which is now known as Safety Public in the Broomway. There's been a lot of discussion about the Kohenet Institute. There's been a decent amount of discussion about New Earth Mystery School and Mariam Hasna. There's been, well, there's discussion about each of us, because many of us have created our own cases or files or threads in the Safety Public channel so that people have spaces where they might feel safe enough to tell us that, you know, there has been something which has been received as abusive. And yeah, I look forward to continuing this work with y'all. Does anybody have anything else to say about this? And I recognize we're going over time here, but it feels appropriate to me. Coming up with the show notes for this episode is going to be a thing, but I volunteer as tribute. Hoda says, as do I. I think look forward to working on this with us. I just want to say thank you all. Yeah, I'm deeply grateful. Look forward to seeing where it goes. And I hope there are many helping hands, because, you know, I think a lot of people talk about like internet community, kind of a hot topic. You know, amongst like what people call teapot on Twitter, there's like a vibe camp, and there are like offspring. They're like offshoot vibe camps in different locations, and then, you know, there's like a Jess camp, and then there's like a Travis camp or whatever. And yeah, I feel like it's great that we're using the internet to create communities, but I feel like a lot of the things which are arising, mostly like in the WhisperNet, or, you know, in direct messages, private messages and such, speaks to yeah, I'd say turbulent and fragmented understanding of what community means. And we've talked about community a bunch in previous episodes of Roundup, which we might post on the podcast at some point. But to me, it's very difficult to have community when relevant information is not being communicated amongst the bodies that make up a communal body. And yeah, I would say that any obstructions to the communication of first-hand experience of abuse within a so-called community ruptures the communal body, and I would say eats away at the communal fabric or the characteristics of community amongst, you know, what I would basically call like an enmeshment of relationships, or an egregore, right? So an egregore becomes less and less communal. I would say like teapot is like 20% communal, because people get abused and then no one hears about it, and many, many other reasons. I would say like the distribution of influence and authority is not just. It's mostly based on the algorithm, which, you know, whether it was by design or by lack of design, tends to optimize for conflict, tends to optimize for narcissistic behavior, tends to optimize for self-aggrandizement. I mean, tends to optimize for stupidity, right? I think if you say something stupid and you get like a bunch of people jumping in to correct you, then you're going to show up in more people's timelines, which seems like, the opposite of what a good community platform might incentivize. So yeah, safety is a way of thing at Broom. Hopefully soon we'll have a Google form that we can start distributing. Perhaps soon we'll have a website where people can get at the Google form and also learn more about both the broom and safety as a way without having to remember some kind of like obscure URL. And I think I'm complete on talking about safety as a way. Does anybody else want to say anything about safety as a way or anything in the broom before, we sort of talk about upcoming containers? All right, does anybody want to talk about upcoming containers? Well, I can go through the events tab. How about that? So, basically, Monday to Friday, there's a group channeling and exorcism session, which I hold space for, but many people contribute to. It's called T, as in like time. Today at 8 p.m. Sofia time, 12 p.m., no, 1 p.m. New York time, the first session of the Dojo December series, which comes out of the 000 lineage space, is taking place, and I'll be offering energy work to a practitioner named Maya Harvesto or Diamond D. We have a read aloud session of chapter 6 of the Sharia Way book club book, which is The Mysticism of Music and Sound, or Sound of Music, I never remember which, by Hazrat Inayat Khan. Oof. There will be a new container held by a fairly new user named Keeper of the All, or Oyugi, which will be about their culture, which is, I believe, predominantly the Luo culture, which is mostly prevalent in Kenya, which I'm really looking forward to diving into. Every Friday I hold a container called Why Am I Like This, where I answer questions that people have posed to me which feel like they would benefit from synchronous space-time treatment, and I channel a star named Sirius C, if you believe me. On Saturdays we are holding space for the book club itself, not just the reading of the book, but the exegesis of what we have been reading. Every Sunday, I'm going to probably have to stop doing this soon because my voice is tired, but every Sunday we have Archetypal Hour, which is 90 minutes with at Adam Archetype, where we talk about, egregores. And, I think that's kind of funny, and I'd say, like, as a Taoist practitioner predominantly, it's very much tendency of my lineage is to eviscerate egregores without asking questions, but I think part of the remembering of Taoism or Taoishness in current time is to exercise discernment around sort of like least bad egregores, and I feel like, without denigrating that container too much with what I just said, I'd say it's a delicious space for discerning and renewing and re-enlivening the egregores that we tend to use in typical Western society especially. And then, just to take us through the Monday, this is like all the stuff that's happening live in the room. And I think hopefully soon we'll have much, much more content, and we can like actually call ourselves like a 24-hour radio station one day. But Mondays at 3 p.m. Sofia time, or 7, gosh, that's early. 8 a.m. New York time, 7 a.m. Louisiana time, egregiously early Pacific time, I hold a container called Spa, which is where I channel a martial arts lineage, if you believe me. And then also on Mondays, we have the field tuning container from Hodo, where it seems like right now Hodo will be offering divination for the week. And that's all I'll say on it, and I know it's inaccurate. So does anybody want to talk about any of those containers coming up? I think the TLDR is like we have a shitload of juicy content coming through the room. And
Yes.
if you want to go on.
No, I just was literally gonna say yes to that. We have so much going on. It's popping.
Yeah. And the easiest way is just to jump into the broom. We don't have a website yet because we're kind of scrappy. But hopefully one day, we have a Google Calendar, which you can add to your Google Calendar or, whatever. So many different calendaring technologies. But, I think the easiest way to get acquainted with the offerings of the broom and the members of the broom is to join us. And then, I guess the only other thing I would say with the broom is my sense has always been that even if you're not active in the broom or you're not attending live containers, then the offerings of the broom are available in your scene. And I know a lot of people aren't really sensitive to picking up on offerings in the unseen. I know a lot of people unconsciously steal things from other people's Akash. That's okay. I would say the broom is a pretty locked down astral container, and I would say that anything that anybody can pick up on through the broom is offered with the knowing that on some timelines that we'll end up navigating as a collective or as a collective human consciousness, these wisdom codes will proliferate out into the collective, and those are offered safely. And which is not to say that shit doesn't go down the broom, but I would say that it only goes down in ways which lead to refinement. This is Cody Death sometimes. It's great. What Mariam Hasna say once, it's better to be a warrior in the garden than a gardener in a war. I don't know if she quoted someone on that, but I don't care. It feels pretty apt to me. It's come to the broom. You gotta learn a lot, probably laugh a decent amount. Got some good tunes, for sure. And then you might get into some disagreements, but those disagreements will help you prepare for the necessary and, somewhat, I'll say necessary disagreement outside of the broom, because I think there's lots that we kind of need to disagree with. And I don't think that most of us are prepared to disagree with these things straight out of the box. And I feel like it's very much a preparatory ground for that kind of disagreement, as well as many other places. Yugi says more disagreements. Ashe. One of the things that I feel like I've become known for saying, which I don't know where it came from, I feel like I probably heard it somewhere, is just please disagree. It's very much opposed to I want to say the default timbre of people's assertions, which is just please believe me, or this is the truth type of thing. And I think that it's very possible to disagree harmoniously. And going back to what I was saying before, I think it's the water and the mineral content, which sometimes arises from lightning strikes, which keeps the soil juicy and fertile and nutritious for not only humans, but all the other forms that contribute to the intelligence. Does anyone say anything before we invite Craig to take a nap?
I think I can say something.
Yes, please.
Tomorrow, tomorrow for the container tomorrow at 8:30, the culture hour. I'll be doing an introduction into my culture, the Luo culture. I think it's important for I think it's important for all of us to do some groundwork before the time. You can do a little research online, so that when when the time comes for the container, um,
Uh-huh.
I I, 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 I like questions, like I like answering questions. Um, you can shoot your questions. Then I will teach through your questions. Uh, um, yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, so if you have questions about the culture hour and what's going to be shared in the culture hour, then please shoot questions to Oyuki. I think we'll try to make some space so it's more obvious where y'all can shoot through those questions. And yeah, anybody else want to round anything up before we close the container for now? Oh, someone's typing. Nothing from me right now. It says, Hoda. We have a group exercision session coming up in about 38 minutes. So I'm going to stop the recording and I'll try to leave as much information in the show notes as I can, so some of the things we talked about are a little bit more legible, especially for those who are listening while doing lots of different things, didn't have the chance to write things down, can't understand my Australian accent, and I have to, I will probably help take care of my cats now. But thank you all for joining Roundup on 13th of December 2023, and I'll see y'all in the room. Peace.